topic is Marcus Garvey and Africans in the Caribbean, and we're talking to Dr. AAl-Hadid3, the chairperson of the Africana Studies Department at Tennessee State University. Dr. AAl-Hadid3, during this last segment, let's give you an opportunity to talk about Marcus Garvey and his influence and some of the influences that helped to shape Marcus Garvey, as well, and some of the influences that his personality and his vision helped to shape as well. Let's talk about it from that perspective.
Yeah, when we left off, we said that Marcus Garvey entered this country in 1916. Mm-hmm. Now, it was a time where we were moving toward the Harlem Renaissance, when Harlem, was in vogue. Mm-hmm. And Garvey came to this country and started his organization called the Universal Negro Improvement Association. Mm-hmm. And the time period of Garvey's most powerful influence in this country was between 1916 and 1926. Mm-hmm. So you're talking about within one decade, mm-hmm. here's a man that using the power of the spoken word, mm-hmm. Saying, up you mighty race, you can accomplish what you will. One God, one aim, one destiny. Mm-hmm. Africa for the Africans at home and abroad. Mm-hmm. He was able to mobilize more than 6 million people of African descent mm-hmm. around the world. Mm-hmm. I mean, he literally had thousands of chapters of the Universal Negro Improvement Association inside mm-hmm. the United States. Mm-hmm. Garvey's basic vision was to create a United States of Africa. Mm-hmm. This was during a time, we're talking about right after the First World War, when imperialism was entrenched in Africa. They needed the natural resources there in Africa. The Germans had fought a war against the colonizers in order to colonize the colonizers, mm-hmm. which failed. And so Garvey now is coming to seize Africa. Mm-hmm. And as he's agitating to seize Africa, decolonize the Caribbean, he mm-hmm. becomes a big threat in this country. Mm-hmm. And he became so much of a threat that J. Edgar Hoover infiltrated this movement, and for the first time in the history of the Federal Bureau of Investigation, mm-hmm. he actually hired an African-American mm-hmm. with a code name 800, mm-hmm. not just an informal person, mm-hmm. but a person actually on the payroll mm-hmm. to infiltrate his organization. And when his organization was infiltrated, they accused him of mail fraud because mm-hmm. he had started the Black Star Line. Mm-hmm. This was a big shipping company that he wanted to put together in order to do trade between mm-hmm. the Caribbeans and Africa and the African-American side of the United States. Mm-hmm. And Garvey had these very grandiose designs. Mm-hmm. He was full of pomp and pageantry. Mm-hmm. He knew mm-hmm. how to raise money. Mm-hmm. Very, very charismatic. Mm-hmm. He had the type of charisma of, say, a Martin Luther King mm-hmm. or Malcolm X. But he could just stand on a street corner and just move thousands of people. And he was very powerful in that regard. Mm-hmm. Now, his organization was composed of West Indians and African Americans. Mm-hmm. And as you know, sometimes West Indians and African Americans don't always see eye to eye. Mm-hmm. So you had this type of tension in the organization. Mm-hmm. You also had tension in the organization around the question of people who were educated and those that were uneducated, mm-hmm. people from the South, people from the North. And there was some corruption in the organization because he surrounded himself a lot by people that he could trust, mm-hmm. but not necessarily people that were competent, people that were loyal to him, but not necessarily competent. So that was part of his undoing. And he built the organization around himself mm-hmm. rather than delegating responsibility and leadership. And then there were some areas where he didn't have competencies. Mm-hmm. And so that created this problem inside of the organization. Mm-hmm. But when he was eventually arrested for mail fraud, he was taken to prison in Atlanta around 1926. Mm-hmm. And when he got out in 1928, they sent him straight back, they deported him rather, mm-hmm. back to Jamaica mm-hmm. and told him he couldn't come back inside the United States. So after 1928, his power inside of this country around the world started mm-hmm. to wane mm-hmm. in terms of his organization. But his vision did not go away, because you have to remember, while he was talking about uniting people of African descent around mm-hmm. the world, Du Bois was also organizing his Pan-African Congresses mm-hmm. during the 1920s as well. And so they were working concurrently. Du Bois was organizing the intellectuals, mm-hmm. and Garvey was organizing the masses of the people. Yeah.